Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 22 of History's Greatest Idiots, the show where we look back through all of human history and bring you examples of absolute undeniable human stupidity so that you can take lessons from other people's mistakes and never repeat them again. But who are we kidding? We're humans. We like making mistakes, like my mistake in making that Halloween-specific intro about 3 years ago now, and just like having it cut straight off at the end, no warning at all.
But you nailed it this time. It was perfect. I loved that.
I couldn't stop myself from laughing. No, I'm like, that's so fucking amateurish. Joining me as ever is my amazing co-host and dear friend Derek. Derek, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Yeah,
it's good.
It's an awesome weekend. Went and saw a movie last night for.
Oh, what did you see?
Went and saw Smile 2.
Oh, how is that?
It's not bad for a sequel. It's good acting and a lot of gore. It's it's a good time. Some jump scares.
Kind of like standard Halloween time of year film, which I'm fine with. Like, this is the time of year I want to see that type of film. I went to Texas Roadhouse on Tuesday. Nice. Welcome, Toastoid. What did you see in the Texas Roadhouse on Tuesday? So Smile 2, decent. Yeah.
I wouldn't say don't go see it. I'd say check it out if you dig horror movies.
Or if like
time.
Yeah, exactly. Or like if you've got like nothing else to do and you got to spare $10 or $20 or however much it is these days. I did a similar thing the other day, although not quite the cinema. I have been going to the cinema a lot more this year, and I've really appreciated being able to do that. But I kind of went a bit mental on the buying films online thing, and I just bought a bunch of them because I was I really want to watch the prequel to The Thing. That was made in 2011. I feel like watching that, and you know what? It's not bad. It's not a bad film. And I was like, well, now that I've bought that, I have to buy the digital version of The Thing. And my wife was like, you've already got that on Blu-ray. And I was like, well, I don't know. I'll buy it as well. And then I was like, oh, Beetlejuice 2. Yeah, why not? Whatever. It was okay. And then I was like, oh, Alien Romulus is available to buy. I'll have that as well. So I ended up buying 4 films, and we watched them all, and I enjoyed them. Alien Romulus is decent. The last half hour goes off the rails a little bit, though.
Okay. Yeah. Well, film buying binge.
Yeah. It was really good, actually. I was really pleased I bought all of them. And like Toastoid here, I got a big burger, steak fries, and a Coke. It's the American response to the full English breakfast. Yeah. I do like big American burgers, steak fries, I'm assuming that is, and cocaine. That's a good combination. Because English breakfast is just like bacon, sausage, beans, mushrooms, black pudding. Also, a lot of Americans be like, oh, black pudding, it's blood. It's fucking delicious, is what it is. You fry that shit, it's tasty. So, doesn't sound appealing, especially if you're a vegan, but man, pig's blood pudding is fucking delicious. I can't even describe it to you. It's like super savory and salty, and sort of melts in your mouth because it's blood. Super delicious. So I went on my binge. I really enjoyed it. Alien Romulus is really good. Beetlejuice 2. A lot of people, I think, have maybe over romanticized. It's like caviar minus the fish. Yeah, that's a fair description, actually, of blood pudding. Yeah, that's a very similar consistency. I will say that. So Beetlejuice 2, a lot of people have the original version of the original Beetlejuice is like, it's got a very simple narrative, but around it is a bunch of crazy chaos and shit. And like the dancing and the calypso music and fucking Beetlejuice basically sexually assaulting everyone around him. So it's like a lot of, it's a good film, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot of chaos in that, and I think people sort of forget that. Tim Burton on top of his game for sure. Either that or Edward Scissorhands, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That was a cracking first film, if I've ever seen one, and a few others as well. But yeah, so I was watching it, and there's this bit in the film, spoiler alert, there's a bit, because they keep on going on about, the dead can die, they can get on the soul train and they can go to the afterlife. And soul train, they're making a big deal out of it. And then you see the soul train, and it's a bunch of dead African American soul people dancing on the train and on the platform. Like, and I looked at my wife and I was like, first of all, who's gonna fucking get this joke? Like, other than like us and everyone older than us, like we're basically the only people that will get that joke. And also, this is racist, right? This feels a little racist. And she's like, yeah, a little bit. Feels a little bit racist.
I mean, it's just to me, yeah, it was just bad hacky writing right there. It was a hacky joke.
Yeah. Also, I read a review that really confused me about Beetlejuice, which I hate saying that. They said Michael Keaton has more energy than he did in the original. I'm like, no, he fucking doesn't. He's tired. He's like 75 years old. He's doing that version of Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice has become Tom Waits in this film, where it was like the original Beetlejuice was like maybe Tom Waits in the early 70s when he had like a bit of a range to his voice, you know, instead of old goblin, basically. But no, he definitely didn't have the energy that he had in the original. Are you fucking joking? Anyway, it's fine. I so much so that my mum was like, yeah, that was okay, because she watched it as well. So if my 7-year-old mother is like, it's okay, then I'm sure it's fine for basically everyone. You know,
I liked it. I thought it was good. Yeah. It had a lot of dad jokes, a lot of and it missed with some for me, but all in all, it was good.
Yeah, probably didn't need the Monica Bellucci storyline at all. Like, she appears, she kills Danny DeVito.
Oh, yeah.
Spoiler alert!
So dumb.
Like, and then she disappears for like an hour and a half, and then reappears, and then she's dead. And like, we could have done without this whole storyline and devoted some of that time to other character development.
Yeah,
because we already had like the daughter and the family dynamic there, and then this boyfriend comes on the scene, and then the stuff with Beetlejuice and the stuff with like,
it was way too busy. Yeah,
it was a lot of stuff. Like, we could have just done away with the Monica Bellucci Beetlejuice's girlfriend stuff. We could have saved that for the third one, which undoubtedly is on the way because they made a shitload of money on this. Anyway, this isn't a film review podcast. I just want to point this out.
10 minutes in, it's not a film review podcast,
which is like destroying Tim Burton's work at the moment. But you should see the Broadway version of Beetlejuice with Alex Brightman. I'm just sad that we never got Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. Which have you ever heard about this? This is a story. So Kevin Smith he'd had big success with Clerks, obviously his first film, and he was invited in to pick one of two projects. And what the first one he was offered was Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, and he was like, "Really? We didn't say all we had to say with the first Beetlejuice film. Do we really need to go tropical with it now to finish it off?" And the other one was this like long muted Superman sequel, and Nicolas Cage was on board to do it, and Tim Burton was going to direct it. And he was like, I'd love to write that script. And they're like, well, it has to go through a bunch of people. And he got an opportunity to write it and work with John Peters, who's the producer of the Batman films and the Superman films. And he's like also completely fucking insane. So there's this, like, if you Google, what's it called? Kevin Smith Superman story. He does it at a Comic-Con. It's like a 20-minute video where he tells this amazing story. And John Peters like, listen, I've got a bunch of stuff that you need to do in the Superman film. First of all, he can't fly. Don't want to see him flying. That's ridiculous. Also, he can't be wearing a cape. It makes him look ridiculous. He can't be wearing a cape. And also, at the end of the film, he's got to fight a giant mechanical spider. And he's like, what? And he was like, I just want that King Kong moment where, like, you know, the doors open and King Kong comes through. That's what I saw when I was a kid, and that blew my mind. And he was like, also, do you know anything about spiders? And Kevin Smith's like, no. And he's like, deadliest killers in the animal kingdom. And he's like, all right. And then anyway, the story goes on, and at the very end, like, John Peters comes to see his next film, which ends up being Chasing Amy. And he was like, oh yeah, it was an interesting film, really interesting message, which Kevin Smith was like, that was his way of saying I didn't fucking understand it at all. And a few weeks later, he went to see John Peters' new film, and it was Wild Wild West with Will Smith. And he was like, so I'm watching this film, and I'm sitting there going, man, this is a horrible piece of shit. This is terrible. And then he was like, and then the end of the film rolls around, and lo and behold, there's a giant fucking mechanical spider that appears out of nowhere. It's because John Peters wanted it in the film. That was his demand. So
he's got a thing for giant mechanical spiders, huh?
Giant mechanical spiders. Yeah, seriously, go and watch Kevin Smith recounting this story. It's one of the funniest stories you will ever hear in your life. It's still around on YouTube. I think there's like a version of it with like Spanish subtitles. That's the one that I've watched or something. It's really amazing, and it kind of just shows you how insane Hollywood is, because he even went back to the heads of Warner Brothers afterwards, after meeting John Peters, and they were like, so what did you think about John? He was like, well, I read in the script and he seemed to like it. And they were like, good. Did he tell you about the spider? And he was like, yeah, what the fuck is the deal with the spider? And they're like, we don't know. We can't get him off the spider thing. So it's like, it's a funny testament. Anyway, sorry, we have been going on about films for way too long, but it's Halloween. We have a special Halloween background. And we've got a little bit of a special Halloween exclusive episode for you. Now, in the past, we've done serial killers. We did Elizabeth Bathory, I think, was one of our Halloween victims.
Yep.
And also, what's his name? You covered the guy who was the inspiration behind like Hannibal Lecter and
Ed Gein.
Ed Gein, yes. Ed Gein. We covered Ed Gein. That was really fucking disturbing. We covered a bunch of really interesting people in our Halloween special, but this one I was like, do I want to cover a serial killer? Maybe. Do I want to cover like a Halloween specific crime? Maybe. But actually, I wanted to find something old and something weird that we can kind of still laugh about. I think Ed Gein inspired every other, and their mother, holy shit, like Hannibal Lecter, Leatherface, fucking Psycho.
Dude, I got to see the pot that he like boiled people in when I went to that horror mansion thing in Vegas for that Zach Bagans guy.
Was it made of human skulls?
No, it was just a pot.
Oh,
just a.
I thought like maybe a pair of ladies' breasts or like a skull or something. No, it's just a normal pot, which is about the only normal thing in his house, I think, at that point. It's like, the lamps are all made out of skin. Don't worry about that. But here's a normal pot. Look, it's even non-stick.
They had some other stuff, I think, in there from there. They got all kinds of weird stuff at that museum.
The nipple necklace or whatever it was, or the nipple. I don't even want to think about it.
Sorry, I'll get us off on another tangent, but we'll save that for the patrons.
Absolutely, that's a patron special, the nipple necklace. Oh, speaking of which, thank you for reminding me. That's a good way of jogging my memory. A big shout out to our patrons, Jesse Christ, Kimberly Johnson, Andrew Zavara, Dilly Bob, and Silent Crisis, all of whom have stayed with us for a very long time. Thank you all so much. We sent out a Patreon exclusive present the other day, so hopefully that's winging its way to the wonderful Andrew Zvara. There will be more on the way when people stay with us for a year, and if you would like to join our wonderful patrons and contribute a little bit of money towards this podcast, please go to patreon.com/historysgreatestidiots, where you will get a special gift when you sign up. You'll get behind the scenes footage from our lives, you'll get access to scripts, you'll get Patreon exclusive recordings, and you'll also get annual gifts when you roll around to a year, 2 years. There's a bunch of really cool ideas we have in mind for these, and there's already 2 in place. So get yourself over there. And also, if you want to follow us on social media, please go to Instagram and look for History's Greatest Idiots. You can find us there. And that's also we're available on YouTube as well at History's Greatest Idiots. And if you go onto Spotify, you can watch us live video format as well. So please go there. We've had a really interesting time on Spotify recently. We made $10 whole last month in advertising revenue.
That's what
2,800 plays will get you in a month on Spotify, and you hit a huge milestone, and they give you $10. Thank you.
It's like your birthday money from grandma.
It is. It's like only you have to put in like 10 hours worth of work to get that fucking money. So it's like $1 an hour. Cheers, grandma. That's slave wages. So I was thinking about who to cover, and obviously I mentioned maybe serial killers, maybe like a Halloween specific story, and then I was like, well, maybe I could do something like a Halloween themed thing, and that was a little bit difficult. And then I came across this guy, and it's really fucked up if it's true. and this is a big if. It's up there with the Elizabeth Bathory mass murders thing, where it's like maybe this is just all slander and propaganda against this person. So, but whereas Ed Gein, it's like cut and dry. Like this dude killed people, made a bunch of shit out of them when they were dead, and probably had a bit of a chow down on their liver afterwards as well, with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. So. But anyway, let me get to the story of Tom Fool, the murderous clown and ghost that haunts Muncaster Castle. Noises. A big thanks right now to hauntedpalaceblog.com for this amazing article that compiled notes from nearly a dozen different sources to create an incredibly comprehensive article, because it was really difficult to get like a full article history on this guy, and even I've had to add a few bits here and there, but most of it is from this article. So that's hauntedpalaceblog.com, not hauntedpalace.com. That's probably a different thing, but hauntedpalaceblog.com, who wrote this amazing article. And it starts off by using the Webster's dictionary definition of the fear of clowns, which is coulrophobia.
Okay.
So that's the fear of clowns, from fiction phantoms such as Stephen King's Pennywise to serial killer John Wayne Gacy's alter ego Pogo the Clown, and even the recent trend for killer clowns that swept the US and the UK a few years ago. Clowns have developed a somewhat sinister reputation as of late. I feel like they've always had a reputation of being a bit sinister. Like,
yeah, I mean, they've been creepy my entire life.
Yeah, and I'm pretty certain, like, neither of my parents are fond of clowns. Pretty certain that my grandmother, the two things she won't talk about are her experiences in the Second World War and clowns. Like, that's the horrors of being bombed by the German Luftwaffe for most of your young adolescent life, and clowns, like, those two are on a par for her. But I feel like saying that clowns have ever been anything other than a little bit weird and frightening is fucking stupid, because they've always been creepy to someone.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah, their painted faces and oversized clothes intend to convey innocent humor can, to some people, I would argue most people, appear both uncanny and disturbing. But evil killer clowns are not an entirely modern phenomena. If the stories about Thomas Skelton, the last jester of Monk Castle, that's a fucking ominous name, are to be believed. So Thomas Skelton, is thought by some to be the original Tom Fool, a character from Shakespeare's King Lear, but his last will and testament may hint at a much darker side to this comedian. He left basically a confession behind, and it has since entered into folklore. I don't know if he's fucking around with this confession, but yeah, it's a pretty wild thing to confess to. Let me give you a bit of history first about Muncaster Castle. Muncaster is actually based up in Cumberland, which is in the far northwest of the UK. So you're basically right on the border with Scotland at that point, at the furthest left side of Hadrian's Wall, and it's very remote. It's not particularly densely populated up there. It's very much like marshland, hills, lakes, farmland, and like a few big towns and a couple of cities interspersed in these valleys. So it's very much like a wild and kind of eerie place.
Okay.
The northwest of England, the far northwest of England. Because like the northwest of England, when I say that to most people in the UK, they think of like Manchester or Liverpool, because they're in the northwest of England. They think of like bustling cities with a history and maybe football teams and the Beatles and Oasis and all of these bands and shit. But when I talking about the far northwest, we're basically talking about the north in Game of Thrones. Like, that's how fucking wild this place is. It's pretty
with wildlings and White Walkers.
Almost, yeah.
Okay.
Certainly on a Friday and Saturday night, there's a bunch of wildlings and White Walkers around. So Yeah, Muncaster is actually not its original name. It's a corrupted name, Muncaster. It first appeared in a Cumberland church register as Muncaster in 1577, but the original name, according to all old evidence records, being Mulcaster. So that was the original name, and it just like over 500 years, people seem to forget that it was called that. It was registered in the pipe rolls of Cumberland circa 1150 AD, so nearly like 900 years ago now, as Molecaster and Mulecaster in 1190 and 1236 respectively. So it's like, take your pick. You can either name your giant expensive castle after moles or mules. Which do you fucking want? Can we call it Muncaster so that there's no crap animals involved? Like, all right, go.
See, it was probably Molecaster, and then a little speck of ink got rubbed off, and then it was Mulecaster.
Exactly, yeah. And then someone was like, I'm not having my ridiculously big castle named after a fucking mule. If I'm gonna call it anything, it's gonna be Phoenix Caster or Shiny Giant Lion Caster or some shit. But yeah, it's such weird names. The place name Muncaster contains the Latin word castra, meaning encampment or fort. So castra, castle, it goes on a bit like that.
So it
was
a
caster,
fort of moles.
So it was, yeah, maybe that was like they just saw a bunch of moles, like, I'll name it after the moles. Fuck it.
Maybe it was a spy castle.
Yes. Oh, that would be cool. Yeah. They're like unsuspecting. Maybe that's where we get the term from, insiders, and it comes from there. Yeah, Toastoid Whalecaster would have been a much better name. So it's suspected that the site of the castle lies on the foundations dating back to Roman era, which, if they exist, may represent a castellum, or like Roman castle, slightly bigger than a Roman fort, like they had embankments and stuff like that, for the nearby Roman fort of Glanoventa at Ravenglass. So there is a town I told you it was Game of Thrones. Like, there's a town in Cumbria called Ravenglass. Like that, it doesn't get much more fucking mysterious and Game of Thronesy than a town called Ravenglass.
Yeah, no,
really. It's right up there on the coast.
Yeah, it's full on not Middle Earth, but
well, a little bit. Yeah,
I guess what is the Game of Thrones? It's not Tolkien.
No, that's George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, same stuff though. Fantasy.
Yeah, just more dicks in the George R.R. Martin thing and decapitations. But yeah, it's basically, and actually, if you look at the map of Westeros, it's very much very similar, and you turn it upside down. It's basically the British Isles. Like, it's very, very close to that. Good point for Toastoid here. There are White Walkers, but the locals call them football fans. It's very true. They're, especially when they do the Walk of Shame afterwards. The Muncaster estate was granted to Alain de Penetton in 1208. This is after, this is about 150 years after, well, it is 140 years after the Battle of 1066. So you still got a bunch of like French nobles taking up land across like the UK because the Normans invaded and won, and this is the legacy here. The oldest part of the castle include the Great Hall and the 14th century Pella Tower, a type of watchtower fortification unique to the English and Scottish border regions. Probably because it was really fucking big, because they're like, keep those Scots away, and the Scots were like, keep those English away, jeez. So Thomas Skelton is famous for being the last jester of Muncaster Castle, a stately pile near the village of Ravenglass. Thomas is the named subject of a famous full-length portrait that hangs in the castle. I've seen this picture. You can Google Thomas Skelton portrait, and it's kind of fucked up how terrifying he is in this portrait. It doesn't, like, you see portraits of old people or people, ancient people, like wealthy families or Renaissance era figures and stuff like that. They're not always looking super happy or healthy and stuff. But this portrait of Thomas Skelton, which is hanging in like a hallway or a corridor in Muncaster Castle, he looks evil. There's no two ways about it. He looks really fucked up. And I was very much happy to see that when I was using it for the thumbnail for this episode. I was like, oh yeah, that's going to draw people's attention. It's pretty fucked up. The picture depicts a ruddy-faced middle-aged man dressed in a jester's motley, holding a staff of office. It looks more like a fucking spear he's going to kill people with, in one hand, and a document written in doggerel, attested to be his last will and testament, hangs beside him as well.
Is that what that is?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the thing on the wall next to him in the portrait is his last will and testament. Apparently, this is where all of this information comes from. Really weird. It's the stuff of nightmare fuel. So in a sort of like weird drunk dude in town dressed up in weird clothes, he's going on like a 17th century rampage. It's sort of like pre-rampage look that he's got on his face. It's really disturbing. The portrait was painted by a family retainer. What about it is nightmare fuel? It's just a dude. Well, it's a 17th century dude dressed up like a clown. So I mean, there we go. It's kind of like, I guess because it's not a great portrait, it's even more terrifying. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's like 350 years old, so I'm guessing that's probably why he looks more bored than anything. This dude definitely wasn't bored, unless like what we're going to talk about. Maybe he was bored because he couldn't do that often enough. Anyway, so the portrait was painted by of a family retainer, must indicate that he was a beloved family servant. His attire is masterfully comic. His patchwork robe, staff of office, and scroll and mock privy seal on all act to parody the pompous badges of office of high officialdom. So he's taking the piss out of rich people, basically. That's his job. And rather than listing his titles and achievements, the scroll offers up what purports to be Tom Fool's last will and testament. He even mocks the noble gallant with the name of his lady pinned to his hatband, aping the fashion of the day whilst wearing his jester's motley. So he's like, oh, look at me. I'm in shit clothes, but I'm you. So, yeah, he's mocking rich people while being very well employed by them at the same time. That's basically it. He's a satirist, and a lot of court jesters were at the time. They were actually more trusted than a lot of other people because they were the only ones that were allowed to be truly honest, and actually scathingly so at times as well. So they would take the piss out of their charges and their kings and stuff, and the kings couldn't do anything about it. They were like, okay, you have free reign to do or say what you want, but you're still a fool, so play the part, sort of thing. Do it in a weird way. Yeah, it's very clever. But this is kind of late on in the world of gesturing. Jesters have been around for hundreds of years at this point, but we're into the Enlightenment era at this point, so I'm amazed that they're still a thing, but rich families are still employing them. So interestingly, the portrait at Muncaster Castle isn't the only portrait of Tom Skelton. E.W. Ives, in his article for the Shakespeare Survey focuses his research on a second portrait purchased by the Shakespeare Society in 1957 from the Hay Hall collection of the Earls of Crawford and Balgaress. It is by examining this portrait and the text of the will that E.W. Ives has attempted to pinpoint exactly when and where Tom Fool lived. And Tom Fool is the character from, as we mentioned earlier, the Shakespeare play King Lear. I'd be a jester that doesn't talk, but I just kick people in the balls in Morse code. That's fucking brilliant, dude. I do that. Toasty. That's a brilliant suggestion. Ives uses references from to well-known local individuals named in the will, cross-checked with burial records from Wigan, which is where the second hall is. This is where Hay Hall is, to build a picture of the movements and dates of Tom Skelton. He proposes that although Tom Skelton was originally the jester at Muncaster, upon the death of Lord Pennington, his employer, Tom accompanied the young heir when he was sent to live with his relatives, the Badshaws, at Hay Hall in Wigan. So while he was mourning and they were sorting out the estate, he was sent to live with family members, and that's where this guy traveled to. At Hay Hall, sometimes between 1659 and 1655, a portrait of Tom was painted. Sir Roger Bradshaw's wife was a Pennington and may have known Tom Fool as a child. I've suggested that when the heir reached his majority and wished to return to Muncaster, obviously where he grew up, he wanted to take the portrait of the much-loved jester with him. So it would suggest at this point in time that this dude actually died here. But that's kind of, that may not have happened, so we'll get to why later. Anyway, as Tom Fool had been a well-loved family servant at both Muncaster Castle and Hay Hall, a copy of the portrait was commissioned to remain at Hay Hall, possibly completed in the 1680s, while the original returned with the heir to Muncaster Castle. So this guy is really well liked. Both sides of the family are like, you are a grade A jester, like you just know your shit, you know, you've got it down, the clothes smell just bad enough, and
that just trips me out that's such a thing.
Yeah, and
this is real life.
It's weird, isn't it? And it's like, he's a man of little words, but good lord, can he kick? Yeah, basically that's it. I feel like, you know how we're talking about AI is going to take all of our jobs and shit like that. I feel like the jesters of the day would have been like, these traveling entertainers, they're fucking taking my living. These traveling vagabonds and like traveling Wilburys and these people, these musicians, they're taking our work. We just used to live in these people's homes, and now they can just employ random freelancers to come in and do the work for them. It's like, it's very much like, this is just the way the world has changed throughout time. You get replaced. So I've stated that there is no evidence that Skelton returned to Muncaster after 1659 with the young heir, while the young heir was away. So it would seem likely that Tom died at Hay Hall. Likely, but not depending on what you believe in the story. I like you, Thomas. You're not like the other jesters that just kicks people in the nuts as a form of communication. Yeah, we're running with that joke every time. We're going to bring that back multiple times. I love it. There were two main types of fools or jester. The natural fool, who was someone with a physical or intellectual disability, or the artificial fool, an entertainer or comedian. So obviously, I'm just going to point out something here. It was a different time, so please don't be too harsh on the rich twats of the 17th century they were too busy fending off the plague to really give any serious thought to treating people with disabilities in a really quite appropriate way. They were just like, oh, you have a disability, make me laugh. As in, like, yeah.
So that was, you could get employment with people just laughing at you or with you, just depending on, how the rich ass felt.
Basically, yeah. And I guess that employment, I mean, it's funny because people will say that, people were cast out in this time. And it's true that people, for various reasons were cast out of society. But, there wasn't really that much labor that could be wasted. So if there was a use that people could find for you, you would be put to work. So it might be like basket weaving. It might be collecting vegetables. It might be shoveling shit. There's some work out there for you because, people are dropping dead at 45, 50 at this point. So, you really need everyone to work, especially when it was more kind of communal focused and like you're working the land for a lord and stuff like that. Everyone needs to work. Everyone needs to earn their living. So, it doesn't mean that they're treated with any respect, but people with disabilities at least had more or less the same opportunities as people at the time who were able-bodied or whatever, because everyone was needed. So to a certain extent, anyway. Fools and jesters were often part of royal courts or noble family courts, and by virtue of their position could often speak harsh truths to their betters in the guise of drollery, so they could take the piss out of them as long as it was funny. Shakespeare often uses the fool in his works as the voice of common sense and wisdom. In Twelfth Night, the jester is remarked to be wise enough to play the fool, which is like, I love that phrase. That's, yeah, basically you're smart enough. Loki in Norse mythology was a little bit of a jester. Once he was tasked with making a giant laugh, and he did this by tying a rope to the beard of a goat and the other end to its nuts. Thank you, Toasto, for that one. I did not know that, and that would have been funny to see. But yeah, like that's essentially what we're talking about here. It's satire in that you are talking about actual things that are happening, but you're doing it in a way that you can get away with it. So they want to hear the truth, but they want to hear it sugar-coated. So,
well, because they're perhaps too dumb or not dumb. What do you call it? Cognitive
entitled
distant to believe or understand that you're telling them the truth.
Yeah, I think so. Like this lowly person wouldn't dare tell me, someone who could essentially have them killed, the truth. But actually, the other person's like, yeah, you're just too stupid to realize I'm doing that. Maybe, yeah. So,
yeah.
It's true, and it's interesting that there's this dynamic going on, that they're actually really well respected, even though they're kind of doing the harshest job possible for these quite powerful individuals. Anyway, like many fools and jesters, Tom was a valued and trusted servant of the Pennington family, entertaining them with a mixture of practical jokes and wit. He's famed for such clownish antics as cutting off a branch while he sat on it. So basically just like snip, drop into the ground. Classic. And this is a weird one. Greasing up banisters on the staircase to annoy guests. Then when asked who was responsible, quipped that he thought everyone had a hand in it, which is it was pretty good.
Dad jokes.
Yeah, he's doing dad jokes while putting lube on the staircase. That's pretty funny.
Also, dad jokes.
Yeah, putting like adders and asps in people's wigs, ordering 50 battalia fish pies to be delivered to someone's house, locking them in a cupboard with an angry wolf. You know, the typical 17th century pranks that people did. Did this guy invent dad jokes? No, but he did invent killer clowns. So we'll get to that. Also, so relatively normal pranks and stuff to make the family laugh, along with like, oh, here's a bit of social commentary for you. However, things take a more sinister turn in the anecdotes relating to Tom Skelton reported in The Remains of John Briggs, a compilation of tales and essays published in the Westmoreland Gazette and Lonsdale Magazine in 1825. So these are actual news publications now.
Okay.
Briggs related what purports to be oral tradition surrounding a murder committed by Thomas Skelton at the behest of Sir Ferdinand Hoddleston of Milham Castle. So we'll get to that in a second. But apparently, one of this guy's favorite pastimes was to sit under a tree, like by the castle, in front of the castle, and people would ask for directions. And if he didn't like them, he would direct them to a path that went near the edge of a cliff that had a very unknown to most people except a few locals quicksand section.
Oh.
So if he didn't like you, he would tell you to go in the direction that he knew involved quicksand and you might die. If he liked you, he'd send you on the right path. So that's pretty fucked up to begin with. He may or may not have killed people by doing that, but he definitely killed someone doing this, if this is to be believed. And it seems like oral traditions from the time are pretty much standard, because he was a servant and they did not get written about except in Shakespeare plays, and all of them were fictional. So it's probably likely that this is true. So he invented the old quicksand gag as well. Yeah, the old, send your victims to quicksand. So it all began when Hellwise, the lovely daughter of Sir Alan Pennington of Muncaster Castle, had disguised herself as a shepherdess and attended the May Day festivals in order to meet her secret lover, Richard the Carpenter. Dick the Carpenter.
He's good with wood.
He is good with wood. And also, like, her name is Hellwise.
Yeah.
Hellweeze, maybe it is, but that's a terrifying name. Sounds like one of Pinhead's fucking Xenobites or something. Like, Jesus
Little
Christ.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dick the Carpenter, come with me. I have such sights to show you. Also, oh wow, this is difficult to say. Wild Will of Whitbeck. Yeah, I can't believe I pulled that off. Let's Dick the Carpenter joke. So a local ruffian called Wild Will of Whitbeck had fancied his chances, but was rejected by Hellwise. To get his revenge on the lovers, he spilled the beans to Sir Ferdinand, yet another wannabe suitor for Hellwise. So there's two spurned lovers have kind of teamed up to fuck around with Hellwise and her life. But obviously, she's a noble person.
Hellwise must be hot.
Yeah, I mean, either that or she's like the only woman in the village. Like, that's it. Also entirely possible at this point. I'm naming my next D&D villain Hellwise. Yeah, like, it's just the perfect evil name. So yeah, I just also, she's a noble woman, so I guess, you marry into this family. Eventually, you get a castle out of it. Like, that's the deal. So angered at losing out to a humble carpenter, Sir Ferdinand went to Muncaster Castle, bent on informing Sir Alan Pennington of his daughter's low connections. Oh, scandal. However, as chance would have it, first he met with Tom Fool, aka Thomas Skelton, and had the following conversation in which Tom recounted a nasty trick he played on Lord Lucy's footman. This seems to have given Sir Ferdinand an idea of Tom's homicidal potential. It's a bit extreme, but okay, let's go into it. He asked me, said Tom, if the river was passable, and I told him it was, for 9 of our family had just gone over. They were geese, whispered Tom, but I did not tell him, the fool, set into the river, and would have drowned, I believe, if I had not helped him out. This Old English makes no sense to me. So he basically tried to intentionally drown this fucker. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you can get through there, but no, he nearly drowned.
Okay.
So he is starting to sound like a psychopath at this point, like sending people off to quicksandy deaths and, hey, footman, you can get through there, you'll be fine. And then he nearly drowns. Like, Jesus.
Oh, just kidding. Sorry, here, let me help you out.
Let me get you out. I've got witnesses. Let me just drag you out of here. Briggs goes on to recount that Tom also had a personal grudge against Dick the Carpenter. Back to the Old English again. I'm just going to apologize for this in advance. I put those 3 shillings which you gave me into a hole, and I found them weazened every time I went to look at them, and now they are only 3 silver pennies. I have just found it. I have just found it out that Dick has wizened them. So, hilariously, weazen means to shrivel or disappear. So that Dick has been weazening away the shillings and
weazening out of the hole.
Yes. Also, like, just and I love my inflation calculations. I've been trying to find out how much shillings are worth in modern day money. 3 shillings in 1650 is the equivalent of $20 in 2024 money. But what it actually bought at the time, it would have been 2 days' wages. So in reality, it's really about $250, $300 worth in like real value.
Okay.
So 2 days' wages is not an insignificant amount of money, especially at this time when, that's like you save every fucking penny. And this dude stole money from him because he'd like buried it in a really weird place, and the guy just found it, pinched it, and replaced it with shit knockoff coins. Why didn't he just direct the footman to quicksand? Exactly, like that. I guess it was too far, too much effort. Sorry, what were you going to say, Derek?
I just understood what that meant now when you decoded it. I was unaware that he had jacked his money. That Old English made no sense to me.
Yeah. Like he's found a secret hidey hole for his cash, and Dick the carpenter has been thieving. He's been tea leafing all of that shit out of his little hidey hole and replacing it with fake Monopoly money. So,
Ha!
and so Tom, kill him. This is what Sir Ferdinand said to Tom: "Kill him, Tom, with his own axe when he is asleep sometime, and I'll see that thou takest no harm for it," replied Sir Ferdinand. "He deserves it, and I'll do it," said Tom. "Chop up that dick, Tom." So, can't help it. So
he's gonna whack the dick off.
he's gonna whack that dick. And he deserves it. That dick deserves the whacking. So
with an axe.
it's a pleasure to whack that dick. And the next day, so he doesn't really. This isn't like one of those drawn out plans. Dick. I mean, that's what I've been hinting at, Toasterzoid. But yes, this dick is getting circumcised. So very, very good. Dick the carpenter. The wood is getting chopped. So it's this plan, which you would think they would take care to do, time to do and stuff, especially as it's effectively a plot to destroy a family in a sort of roundabout way.
Yeah, it's breaking up Hellwise and her man.
Yeah,
right?
and her dick. It's breaking up Hellwise and Dick, the romantic comedy for the age. So they, instead of taking a while and planning this carefully, apparently Tom Skelton, Tom Fool, is kind of not really great at thinking things through or long-term planning. He's just like, does it involve quicksand? No. Does it involve water? No. Then I'll just fuck it. I'll just do it. Like he doesn't plan this out at all. Because literally the next day, this quote, I read it and I was like, right, I'm definitely doing this now. The next day, while the unsuspecting carpenter was taking an afternoon dinner nap, gotta love those. That sounds
afternoon dinner nap.
Yeah, I think he's having a siesta. I know. Yeah, like let's have that, please. Have a bit of lunch and then a nap afterwards. Yes, please. And dreaming probably of the incomparable beauties of his adorable Hellwise, Tom entered the shed and with one blow of the axe severed the carpenter's head from his body. Yeah. And this is the part where I'm like, fucking hold on. Maybe all of this is bullshit and it's just a joke. Because let me read you the rest of this. Okay. "There," said Tom to the servants who were standing around watching him do it. Yeah.
Okay.
He was in such a rush to kill this fool that he had witnesses. If someone were to play Tom in a movie, who would it be? Who's dumb enough to be this guy? Actually, it's kind of an impressive, creepy role. And looking at the portrait, I'm thinking Willem Dafoe with a bit of hair dye. That could be kind of interesting. He's middle-aged and kind of got a weird, funky face and kind of disturbing looking. Yeah, it's a Willem Dafoe role, 100% for sure.
Yeah,
on that one.
Could be.
Yeah, I could see that. Maybe Jim Carrey, but he's retired or run away from Hollywood now. So he reminds me of Stephen Rea. Stephen Rea? I don't ever know who that is. Maybe Daniel Craig as well. Daniel Craig got a shot at that one. He's done well with the Benoit Blanc stuff in the Knives Out film, so let him have a shot at that. But yeah, anyway, so he's chopped this dude's head off in front of the servants, witnesses everywhere, and he's then come out with this statement. "There," said Tom to the servants, "I have hid Dick's head." Yeah, that's what he said.
Did he?
I have hid Dick's head under a heap of shavings, and he will not find that so easily when he awakes, as he did my shillings. And I read that and I was like, okay, Dick's head under a heap of shavings. He won't find his head that easily. I was like, okay, is this whole thing a fucking joke?
That was Tom that said this.
This is Tom. He's just chopped this fucking dude's head off. And the first thing he says is, "Oh yeah, holy shit, Toasterzoid."
Yeah, that could be him.
Even Rhea, that is a good call. Wow,
yes,
that's a very good call. My God, that's good casting. Man has an eye. So yeah, he's chopped this fucking dude's head off in front of a bunch of witnesses while he's asleep as well, which is fucked up in itself, with his own axe. I feel like you're supposed to be doing this away from
Yeah.
prying eyes, right? And the axe is supposed to be symbolic or something. It's supposed to be a message. This guy not only invented quicksand gag, but also invented half of the dick jokes I use all the time. Yeah.
That's
Go on.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just it doesn't seem to add up. Anyway.
What an amazing jester.
Yeah. It's kind of a jack of all trades. He can make you laugh. He can send people to their deaths. He can chop off dicks. I hid Dick's head under a heap of shavings, and he will not find that so easily when he awakes, as he did my shillings. The servants must have been fucking terrified and chuckling at this at the same time. Like, oh, and you've got a picture of the portrait there, the actual original portrait. It's kind of it's a really, like, that's a good painting. The other one, lesser. I'm not too sure about the Van Dyke beard he's got going on there. Also, the lack of a chin is a little bit weird.
Still,
Stephen Rea, yeah, totally. But then he tweets something problematic and get kicked out by the royal house. I don't know. I think they probably still keep him around and just keep him in a side job off camera, you know. But yeah, the servants witnessed all of this, and this is kind of where the story just sort of ends, really, from his perspective. The conclusion of this unhappy tale was that heartbroken Hellwise entered a nunnery. Did she stay there, or did she just go in the gift shop or something? I don't really know. Entered a nunnery. No, it's all right. It's just, you know, magnets for the fridge and stupid shitty caps and stuff. So
entered a nunnery and was never seen again.
Yeah, they devoured her whole. While the vengeful Sir Ferdinand met a bloody death fighting the Earl of Richmond, Henry Tudor, at Botsworth Field, which frankly seems like a place to place this tale much too early to be attributed to 19th century Tom Skelton. So that's another problem, is that Sir Ferdinand may not have been around at the same time as this dude. But I don't know, it feels... The details of this feel so weird and brazen that I think elements of this story are true. Whether they involve Tom Skelton or not, it's hard to tell. But there's no record of him kind of being arrested or tried or whatever. But it seems to be somewhat real. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this one.
I wouldn't know what record there would be from then, especially like if his family was the rich family in the castle, and who's Hellwise to the family?
Oh, that's their daughter.
Oh, that's so their jester killed their daughter's husband? Yeah, but they didn't like him anyway.
Yeah, so it was just a lover at this point. And also he's lowborn, so
and he was stealing from their jester,
so there's a bunch of different possibilities here, including the none of this shit happened, it's all made up because it endless dick jokes. You know, that's a very real possibility here, especially when you go, I've got Dick's head.
yeah.
But like, I feel that there's another possibility if we look down this route, that maybe Sir Ferdinand, who obviously is very powerful, on the same par as the Pennington family's the figurehead of that family. I reckon maybe he did tell the head of the Pennington family that their daughter was fucking at Dick the carpenter, and maybe it wasn't just Sir Ferdinand that managed to get this guy off. It's also the guy who's employed him for fucking 25 years. And he's like, yeah, can you just go and kill this prick? Because I know that you like killing people. You do it all the time. With the quicksand gag. So maybe that's a possibility here, that he just had a lot of friends in high places that covered that shit up. Maybe.
Could be.
Could be. Maybe this guy, well, there's Tolstoy's head here. Maybe this guy can't be credited with making dad jokes, but I'm 90% certain he invented the aristocrats joke. Yes. Holy shit. Well, which version of the aristocrats joke? Because it changes literally from comedian to comedian. Do you know about the aristocrats?
I know about it, but I haven't heard it.
There's no one version of the aristocrats. It literally varies from comedian to comedian, and depending on how far they want to take it. The two most extreme versions of the aristocrats joke I've heard have come from Billy Connolly and Joan Rivers. Those are the two. The stuff they say in their version of the aristocrats joke. I was unfortunately watching it with my dad, and he's like big fan of Monty Python and like comedy like that, and even he was like, "Oh fucking hell, jeez, that is so horrible." So yeah, the aristocrats, if there's a whole documentary about it where a bunch of comedians tell their version of the aristocrats joke, the two worst ones I heard were Billy Connolly and Joan Rivers, and I'm not surprised that they were the two most extreme. But yeah, if you type in the aristocrats, basically it's like the oral history version of 4chan. They're like the worst of the worst possible, really. So yeah.
So what I need to know now is, do you have a version of the aristocrats joke?
I do. I can't say it because we'll be kicked off Spotify.
Do you think?
I do. I do have a joke that I think I can get away with on Spotify, though. There's a little bit out there. So I went to the hospital last week to visit a friend of mine. He had somehow managed to shove 15 plastic horses up his arsehole. And I asked the doctor how he was, and the doctor told me that his condition was described as stable.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that one. It was one of the few ones I could tell. You should make your version of the joke a Patreon reward. I feel like we might lose patrons. I feel like we could. It's an idea. I'll take it under consideration, Toasty, but I might
we'll put it probably in maybe the next tangent.
Maybe the next tangent, yeah.
They can't kick us off for that.
Holy shit, I'm going to have to write it down now, and then I'll have to fucking burn it afterwards. So obviously back to this story of Tom Fool now. So obviously we mentioned the quicksand thing before. He'd actually... the quicksands themselves were near the River Esk. So this is a real thing. The quicksands are still there to this day. And many people consider this will makes oblique reference to this murderous hobby of his for passers-by. So they think that this will not only talks about this like murder that he committed in front of fucking, witnesses who would probably have had to be paid hush money, but also he talks about sending people that he didn't like that asked him for directions to their deaths. So it's basically his last will and testament is a confession to mass murder, potentially.
Really?
Yeah.
That's all in that will there in that painting.
Apparently so, according to this. Does quicksand preserve bodies like bog bodies do? No, I think it breaks them down pretty quickly because of the heat. Like bog bodies are really quite well insulated because of peat and stuff like that, whereas the heat from quicksand and the pressure just like destroys it and liquefies it and stuff. So yeah, it's a horrible way to die.
Now I heard most of the time quicksand's never really deep enough to get you, but up there it is, huh?
Well, yeah, particularly by the River Usk, because a lot of the riverbanks and stuff are very, very deep. The river estuaries, fast-flowing rivers, will have very, very deep sides to them. So yeah, it's actually not uncommon. There are a few places in the UK. The UK is a weird place when it comes to geographic anomalies, where quicksand is still a thing and you can still die. So yeah, it's
horrible image.
Oh, maybe
up by the River Usk.
Okay. Is it like a dead body, or is it anything we can show on?
Yeah,
I mean, it's the
Halloween
quicksand special. Oh, there you go. Shit. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
That's what Tom's sending people into. I don't know how you missed that and wander into it, but
Like, whoa, this looks interesting. Can we dive in? What the fuck?
They're going in for a
That's
treatment or something.
yeah. Also, just a random thing. Every river in the UK and most of them in the world, the River Esk, the River Usk, the River Severn, the River Ouse, the River Thames, every river in the UK, the Esk, Ouse, Thames, Severn part, it's all various different languages, versions, way of saying river. So every river in the UK that's called like the River Esk, the literal translation is river, river.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
River, river.
River, river. And also the Paraguay River, it literally translated to big river, river. So yeah, I don't know what Lake Titicaca is, but it's probably Lake. Oh shit! Look at that. Is that the river as well, or is this just random quicksand that we're on now?
I'm just looking at quicksand now.
We're just looking at quicksand now. This is like this, guys. If you didn't grow up in the 80s, the fear of quicksand in children was like a big thing.
Dude, cartoons.
Yeah,
it's gonna get you.
They drilled it as a fear into us. That and like fucking around on train lines. Those were the two ways that children died in the 80s, basically. But yeah, a good point by Toastod here. The River Avon. Yeah, River Avon means river, river. I love that. Big river, river, Paraguay river. So so Tom Fool here, or Thomas Skelton, may have been a mass murderer, or it may not have been true at all, and it may just be an exaggeration. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I would imagine he was probably involved in something to do with just getting rid of this Dick the Carpenter, to make sure that this girl could have a normal life. But also, it wouldn't surprise me if he just fucking sent people towards quicksand if he could.
Yeah.
So all of this seemed to paint a picture of an evil and conscientious individual. But is there more to this than meets the eye? And this is an interesting point. The far northwest of England was for hundreds of years, and this is really accurate, a remote and dangerous place. Blood feuds, so constant fucking infighting between families, rough justice, highway robbery with violence, were all part and parcel of everyday life because the roads were very long, very isolated, and people just didn't have the space for proper security. So, 2 or 3 people and a plank of wood or a tree can stop a carriage and steal everything from it, and you're good. You make it, and no one's gonna grass you up either because you're a local. So it could have been propaganda spread by associates of Dick the Carpenter. Yes, that's what it is. They wanted revenge for whatever happened to him. But could these local folk tales and stories have elided themselves onto half-remembered anecdotes of the jolly japes and the crude practical jokes of Thomas Skelton? Maybe.
Did they ever find the dickhead?
They did, apparently not. No, but then okay, let's put this out there. Like, this guy doesn't, like, Thomas Skelton doesn't have a written history other than what's on the internet now, really, and stuff that came up like 300 years after he was dead, or 200 years after he was dead. So the idea that Dick the Carpenter would have any footnote in history, it's like, oh, there's a guy up in Cumbria that was called Dick the Carpenter. That's probably the only thing that's ever been written about this dude, other than like oral histories that have been passed down. It's very difficult for us to understand because in our lifetime, most people have gone from, the only thing their grandparents got was like noted in society was like maybe a feature in obituaries when they passed away. Like that was the only mention of them in any written form for most of their adult life, to everyone having a record of who they are on the internet. And that's happened within our lifetime of 40 something odd years. It's kind of crazy. But back in the we don't even know that much about the noble family that employed this dude, and they were fucking loaded. They were billionaires. So
that's true. How much of the stuff on the internet do you think is going to survive through history, where you're going to have a record of your life and exist?
I would say almost none of it. I would say virtually none of it. Certainly in the written form, I think because there's just so many people being written about, it will just disappear to the sands of time in like 5 years. There's just going to be no written record. It'll be different if it's a major celebrity. Maybe their legacy lives on for 20 years, but you've also got to remember the speed of culture. The only time it's ever going to be preserved is through nostalgia, when people are like, oh my God, do you remember the early days of YouTube or Twitch or whatever it might be? That's the only way that people will remember it, will be through nostalgia, because culture moves and changes so quickly these days. But I genuinely don't believe, you ask someone in 50 years who the Paul brothers were, they're going to be like, who the fuck were the Paul brothers? Like, and there'll be us around these 80 somethings like, I remember when Jake Paul or Logan Paul tried to find Mike Tyson. And
that's probably true.
Yeah, you know, and I've got to be honest, like, you think of a huge name actor or a huge name musician right now. Think of the biggest actor or musician you can think of right now. Like, think about who that person was. Rockefeller remembers the Paul brothers. Yeah, he does. Think about the biggest film star 100 years ago, or the biggest musician 100 years ago. So, 1920s, like Rudolph Valentino, or maybe the Ink Spots, someone like that. Maybe Scott Joplin, someone like that. I don't know. Charlie Chaplin. Other than Charlie Chaplin, I don't think, if you go out in the street now and ask like 50 people to tell you a film by Rudolph Valentino, if one person knows any, I would be amazed.
You know what's sad is the age of people in the building I live in right now. If I went out and asked 50 people if they knew who Jack Nicholson was, I wouldn't be 100% sure that they would know.
Exactly. I think
maybe now with his son being out there.
Yeah, I would say if there's like a relative involved that's become famous, or if stuff comes back around again, like the recent Joker film, maybe there's like heightened awareness of like, Jack Nicholson was a great Joker, and maybe people will be like, oh, okay, Jack Nicholson, and then maybe like one of those group of people will be like, oh, I'm going to look into Jack Nicholson's back catalogue, and they look at The Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and As Good as It Gets and all of these like awesome films, and then all of a sudden they're like, this is one of the greatest actors of all time.
Yeah, it's just kids, I'm just saying, are disappointing as well.
It's like it's a fair point as well, because at a certain point, and there's this statistic that we learn and forget in a week what your average 16th century peasant knew in their entire lifetime because of how much media we consume. But at a certain point, you do have to forget stuff. You have to let certain things go, because there's other important stuff to remember and other important stuff to know. A friend of mine, my best friend, got in touch with me, and he was like, there's this guy, Chris, from university, our time in university. And I was like, remind me who Chris was? And he was like, we spent every day with this dude for a year. And I was like, we did? And this is only 20 years ago now. And he was like, yeah, every single day he was there. We were hanging around with him. We were in the students. We were drinking. You had a great time with him. We went to this thing.
There's your problem.
And I was like, yeah. And he was like, he wants to get in touch with you. Can you get in touch with you? And I was like, yeah, go for it. And he was like, hey, buddy, how you been? And I was like, hey, you, I don't remember this dude at all. So, and that's because my brain has just been like, it remembers selective people from that time and selective events, but it doesn't remember every day or every face. And that's
old
normal.
Sucks.
Yeah. It does. That's part of it. Getting old sucks, to be sure. But like, don't be worried if you can't remember like who was the #1 highest grossing actor of the 1930s, Mickey Rooney. But like, you're not supposed to remember that shit. It goes. And if you ever want to look it up, there's probably a nice 2-hour long YouTube video that you can fall asleep to jog your memory, So that's just the nature of the beast. So the fact that Thomas Skelton may have lived and may have murdered Dick the Carpenter and sent a bunch of other people to their deaths in the most 80s quicksand death possible, or in water, maybe that happened. Maybe it didn't. But fucking, as far as killer clowns go, this dude is the OG. He is the original fucking insane clown posse inspiring, dude. Who knows? But I like to think it's at least partially true because he sounds pretty fucking out there. I'm more cultured than my kids my age, I feel. I don't know. I think it's a different kind of culture, really. I had a weird childhood. We grew up with Betamax and VHS, and I grew up going to museums and planetariums, and it's very different now. The media literacy of a lot of these kids is like through the roof, and I appreciate that. I do wish sometimes they differentiated between the truth and the reality and fiction that's presented to them on some of these platforms. But I wish I could. I envy the abilities and knowledge they have in technical media at this point in their lives. It's a really impressive thing. So culture is hard to divine. And it's harder enough to say who's the holder of that cultural level. So yeah, but anyway, back to Thomas Skelton. In the Middle Ages, there was a tradition in the tarot of showing death in the garb of the fool, death having the last laugh, of course, and some traditions also associate the fool with the trickster and with vice itself. Could these earlier, darker traditions, coupled with bloody local legends, have become associated with the portrait of Tom Skelton? Once the immediate family who knew about him died out, the portrait, with its slightly menacing air, could easily have attracted macabre tales in a similar way that some screaming skull legends may have developed. The Tom Skelton was the last jester of Muncastle, and probably of High Hall itself. And people will say, well, that's because he murdered this dude and a bunch of other people. But actually, jesters at this time were falling out of fashion with the restoration of Charles II to the throne of England. And as the writer points out here, I can't imagine that the Puritans at the time would have had much use for jesters either, because it's like they're fucking boring.
Yeah, they weren't laughing at anything. Laughing was bad.
Yeah, that's the devil's feast, flatulence. Don't make that noise. So yeah, jesters are dying out, and it makes sense because you hear jester, you think like medieval fucking courts and stuff.
Yeah.
You don't think of the 17th century. Yeah, that's right. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm thinking like knights and the little balls and the weird hat and
exactly. So for there to be a professional jester around at this point in time, it's kind of like going to a town you haven't been to in a while and going like, holy shit, there's a candle maker over there, a shop that just makes candles, or like something like that, or a local bakery. Like, it's a really rare thing. One of the things I really love about the town I live in, it has a greengrocer, and it just does fruit and veg. That's it. Yeah. And if you think about how rare that is, I mean, when I was growing up, there were multiple greengrocers per town, because supermarkets really weren't a thing. There might have been one or two in a town of like 30,000 people, because most people would just go down the corner shop or go down their local shop and get the meat and fruit and veg that they needed. But then when the late 80s, when commercialism really took off, supermarkets came by the dozens to each town, and they just swamped these small businesses. But yeah, I'm really pleased that I live in a town that, during the COVID-19 lockdown, I could go to this greengrocers and their shelves were full of fruit and veg. There was no scarcity at all there whatsoever. It was really good. And actually, at that point in time, they started stocking things like eggs and cheese and a bunch of other, like, some meats, some dried meats and stuff. And I was like, this is really good. And I spent the vast majority of my time shopping there. So
where do they get their fruits and vegetables and stuff? Is it just local farmers? And
just local farmers, yeah, like literally no more than 2 miles away.
Outstanding.
So it's cool. Really, really good. And yeah, there's a butcher's as well. I also have a local butcher's, which they have all of their own meat that they kill and process themselves. They don't have it brought in from anywhere. They have their own flocks and their own herds and that. And yeah, it's the best meat you will ever have. It costs a fucking fortune, but by God, it's worth it. So I have a town that is, like, in effect, caught stuck in the past. And it's the same for jesters. They just the fact that they're still around nearly 600 years after their like heyday is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it
Really.
is.
Yeah.
Offing people and throwing them in quicksand.
So at this point, I guess so. They've got nothing else to do. And maybe that's like a hangover of their time when maybe just as we think of them as, oh, they're funny and they're able to take the piss, maybe they were murderers. You know, I mean, everyone else was a murderer at that point in time, so why not? You know, anyway, during his lifetime, Skelton appears to have been very highly valued by the family. So much so that not one, but two portraits were commissioned of this dude in separate halls. So he was either really, really good at his job, or he had so much dirt on them that they had to treat him with respect. I've got to be honest. I feel like it's more likely that not only was he good at his job, but also he could do other shit as well, including maybe killing people.
Dude,
that's my.
What if
Right.
the dad killed Dick the carpenter and the jester saw it and he got himself some portraits painted and cool story made about himself, and then he wandered off into the woods with his shillings.
Yeah, maybe he's like, you know, I'll take the heat, but you fucking look after me. I want this. I want two terrifying portraits done of me. I want people to tell terrifying stories about my life with me sending people off to be murdered. And maybe it was done as a deflection. This guy is the scapegoat. So
there you go.
I that could definitely be a possibility. And there's so many ways you can go with this because there's just not that much information. Again, it could all just be crazy made up bullshit, but we may never know. Even now, his legend as an entertainer has been revived, and Muncaster Castle hosts an annual jester competition in honor of Tom Skelton. It's called Chop That Dick. Not really. But the question that remains
it's
here...
a freak off is what it is.
It's a freak off. It's like a ditty. It's a ditty weekend. No kids allowed after 8 p.m. Maybe
loop the banisters and everybody gets their hand in it.
Baby oil everywhere. Maybe Dick the Carpenter and Thomas were the same person. Maybe it's a kind of a... Yeah, maybe it's a Kaiser Soze kind of situation thing. Like there is no Dick the Butcher. There is only Tom Skelton. Like it's a Dick the Butcher. The legend is made up. But it was Tom Skelton. This is the question. The original Tom Fool from Shakespeare's King Lear. Unfortunately, it looks like that's not the case. The dating evidence seems to be against it, and more pressingly, was Skelton an evil killer clown? His troubled spirit, this is where it gets even weirder, is said to haunt Muncaster Castle to this day. His heavy tread and the sound of a body, the unfortunate carpenter, being dragged up the stairs have been reported by several witnesses. Or maybe that's an actual real person dragging an actual real body up the stairs and they're just going, "Ooh, I'm a ghost," while they're doing it. Is he doomed? Yeah, exactly. It's a good cover. Just like, oh, look at my scary sheets. Ooh, why is there a trail of blood? It's ectoplasm. Is he doomed to walk the earth for eternity, reliving his heinous crime? On that, I will leave you to make up your own mind. This is one of the most mysterious things we've ever covered in this show, because I genuinely think that there's too many elements to this story for it to be entirely made up. There's a possibility it's made up because lol dick jokes, but at the same time, like, there's too many weird elements that go into it for it to be completely fiction. For me, I feel like first of all, Tom Skelton existed. Second of all, he definitely was a very good jester by the sounds of it. And second of all, did he murder someone? Did he take the fall for someone? Did he get involved in a plot to off some guy because he'd gotten involved with someone above his station? Maybe one of them is true, maybe none of them are true, but I just think that there's something there, because a story like that just doesn't get made up, you know? Right. So anyway, maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist now, but I think that Tom Skelton killed Dick the carpenter and probably ran off. Lev, how do we know you're not Thomas? Oh, because no one's going to paint me. Come on. Like, who's going to waste their time doing that shit? But no, it's a really interesting story. So
yeah, it is.
It is. I'm obviously going to ask you to grade this. It's going to be tricky though. Like, how do you grade it? Really?
I don't. Well, on dick jokes, of course.
Of course.
um, gosh, being the originator of bad dad jokes and lubing banisters and uh, I don't even know what to do here because it's so weird and
Yeah.
it's so odd. And I love
Mm.
that he just was like, I'm gonna pull the old bad directions and send you to your death thing. That's
That's
a fun idiot
so.
thing to do.
I think there's two options. The way we do this is two ratings. One, we rate this guy as if all of this murderous stuff is just made up and it's bullshit, and he was just a jester who lubed up staircases and, like, I don't know, maybe left people's hands in warm water when they fell asleep so they peed their pants. I don't know, something like that. And then we give him another rating where, yes, he was a good jester, but also maybe sent a bunch of people to their death and chopped this dude's head off. So two scores.
So on that latter one,
Yes.
murderous killer clown,
Yeah.
and an all right jester. I'm gonna go with a 92.
Sure. Yeah, because he killed. Possibly, if we go with this one, killed at least one person, maybe a few dozen others.
Just because he didn't like him.
Yeah, because he's like, "Fuck you! You're going to the sand trap. Screw you."
And he hit it with humor.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
dangerous. It's bad.
Yeah,
and then if it's all just made up, then it's still a 92 because it's a damn good story.
Thank you. I feel like it is a good story, actually, and it's just a weird one. There were a few different ones I could go with, but then I was like, this guy's called Tom Fool, and he chopped some dude's head off. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the Halloween special right there. So also, if you and it fired off, and this is the way a lot of these get into the podcast for me is if they fire something in my imagination where I'm like, this would make a great film.
Oh yeah, this would be fun.
Oh yeah, but also I feel like the play here with this one isn't to do like a Tom Skelton jester chops some dude's head off film. That's part of the origin story for sure, but I feel like this is a horror franchise with a killer jester who has an axe and that fucking spike thing of his, and called Tom Fool, who goes around trying to decapitate people and maybe sending them to quicksand, and maybe he's immortal, or maybe it's a spirit, or maybe it's someone dressing up as Tom Fool. I don't know, but I feel like that's a Halloween franchise just sitting there uncopyrighted at the moment. So
definitely think that could be done for sure.
Yeah,
like
do it. Yeah, do it as like maybe there's a way of calling Tom Fool. Maybe there's a because the name Tom Fool itself, like if you get,
I feel like Stephen Ray is too big to do a horror movie as Tom Fool, though.
Yeah, I also feel like if you're going to do a Tom Fool movie, you kind of need to do it. It needs to be a bit of a slasher thing, and I don't think Stephen Ray is kind of like, because he was in V for Vendetta, I think was the most famous thing I saw him in. So I feel like you'd need someone who is a bit more slasher oriented, really, rather than like a serious actor.
Yeah, damn.
Yeah, but
God, he looks perfect though. So we need somebody that looks like that. Yeah,
we need someone who looks like Stephen Rea, essentially. But yeah, I mean that's Tom Fool, Tom Skelton, who may be the original killer clown that started an entire trend. And if that is the case, that I mean, obviously clowns are creepy as fuck, and certainly, the most recent famous killer clown will have been John Wayne Gacy, who was the kind of the inspiration behind a lot of that like crazy, horrible, creepy, disgusting, disturbing clown shit. But maybe this guy's the original one. Maybe he started the trend. Maybe he was the turning point for clowns looking fucking terrifying. Or maybe it was like, because apparently it goes back to the 15th century when people were like, oh, we're going to make death a fool in tarot cards. Like, yeah, that's pretty fucking terrifying. So
that's earned that score.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if he killed people, for sure, he definitely earned that score. I like to think that he was a little bit murderous, maybe not entirely murderous, but yeah, I like to believe that oral histories are not just like tales to make people go to bed early or not get out and drink themselves into a stupor, but they're actually based in some element of reality. That would be really cool if they were. So yeah, maybe the last jester of Muncaster really did kill a dude called Dick the Carpenter, who
Yes. I'm just so immature that like everything you're saying is just making me giggle in my head.
I know. I was reading it. I was like, yeah, that was also the other thing that got me. I was like, Dick the Carpenter, yeah, definitely covering the story. So yeah, so that's our show for this week. Thank you all so much. This is the Halloween special. Thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to watch a video version of this podcast, go on to Spotify. You can watch video versions of our podcast on there. Pretty much every episode from like a certain stage onwards is now in video format. And also you can go over to our YouTube page at History's Greatest Idiots, where you can see full YouTube video versions of our podcast, and also support us over on Instagram at History's Greatest Idiots. And if you would like to support us financially over on Patreon, go to patreon.com/History's Greatest Idiots, where you will get a gift for joining us, and you'll get behind the scenes access to our daily lives and scripts as well for each episode. Sometimes exclusive monthly video recordings that are very, very long, where we go off on random tangents, and also an annual gift as well. So that's been our show. I had a lot of fun doing this one. I'm really glad you could be here for this one, Derek, because like I wanted to like tell you this story. I feel like it's just weird enough to be really interesting. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun telling it. Toastazoid, thank you so much for joining us as always. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with another podcast episode. Until then, Derek, would you like to say goodbye, please?
Bye, everybody.
And we'll see you all again very soon. Take care now. Bye.